Interesting discussion that we had the other time, and it's about the state and the church. Should it be one? Should it be separate? Now, the Christian Council, I think on the 9th of April, issued a communique literally telling the state that sit up and do things right, and they were playing their part as a church, to the community. And then it brought about a discussion: should the church stay out or should the church stay in? What I am saying is, since leaders and everything come out of the community, and the majority of the community are Christians, is it the church that has unknowingly brought about this sort of leaders or sort of society who are not too responsible to the state? We are yet to find out. Look at religious manipulations, human rights, prayer comes. Indeed, do we encourage them or not? Somebody is mentally ill and then they are chained by some pastor somewhere. What do we do? When does the state get involved with the church, and when does the church get involved with the state? My name is Nanan Sakwa, and this is PM Express. And where does the conflict and where does the merger begins? Now, with me to discuss this issue is the General Secretary of the Christian Council, Reverend Dr. Kwabena Opunifrimpong, my immediate left. And then to my far left is George Osei-Bimpeh, who is Country Director for Send Ghana, my own brother. Gentlemen, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, this conversation, obviously was very interesting. Viewers thought that we did not exhaust it, and that it's quite educative, and we should, do it again. Now, I want to start with religious manipulation, but I'm going to go all the way back and sort of blame the church. You see, the church is quick to stand up anytime culture or anything, predominantly Ghanaian comes in. The church seems to frown upon it. And the church sort of encourage more westernization. Things are more accepted if they are done the Western way than they are done the traditional way. And so gradually we've all, become westernized in our way. And I feel that the society now has become very detached, and therefore these are we are reaping what we have sown. And so, Rev, I'll start with you. Has the church made us who we are, too westernized, and we frown against don't pour libation, don't beat drums, don't do this, don't do that, and here we are today, not quite white and not necessarily black either?
Yeah, Nana, let me say that if you go to cultural emancipation, the church in this country has played a very key role. Take language, for instance. Yes, we had our own various languages, but when you go to development of languages, putting them into writing, you may know that almost all the indigenous languages that have been written were pioneered by the churches. There are many more. Every culture has its own challenges, and there's need for cultural transformation anywhere, everywhere. I must say that yes, we have allowed over the years cultural imposition where we think anything coming from the West super correct, anything coming from Africa is evil, and by so doing our own indigenous knowledge resources we have downplayed. Now in some academic institution in this country, elsewhere, we've opened up I teach indigenous knowledge system at KNUST myself. That is not true, even though years ago, you have, for instance, this Salem concept where, say, a church will go into a town and then they buy a piece of land at the outskirts of the town. They say, if you want to be a good Christian, just get out from your own people and come and settle in the Salem. In the process, you disconnect from your own people. We've done some good things. We've made some, call it even mistakes. But cultural emancipation is a process we must all go through to get to where our various cultures, especially pre-missionary cultures, must serve modern day Ghanaian life. That the churches have made significant contribution, yes. That we have also made contribution to some of the derogatory remarks. Sometimes you read from books and African traditional religions are described as heathen, superstition, stuff like that, have not been the best. But I think we all need to go through the cultural emancipation, the transformation process, to get the best out of our own.
So then my final question is, has this produced what we are today? Because the average Ghanaian, some will even bleach. Some will go as far as bleaching to feel accepted. You play with white dolls, you're beating at school if you speak vernacular, you watch these things, and now we've added telenovelas 24 hours a day, so, psychologically, we are damaging ourselves psychologically.
Oh, yes, you see, maybe this is a whole big subject that we must read. I thought you were going to talk about religion manipulation.
That's where it started from.
This is super. You see, let's be careful here. Western missionaries who came to Africa came with what they had. You see, they came with the understanding of, call it, civilizing Africa. There was a kind of civilization in Europe then, industrial revolution. There's this fact that Europe had become Christendom, and therefore all other lands were described as heathen land. So they came here already with a prepared garment, and they tried that it should fit you. You see, I don't think Western missionary and anthropologists and merchants who came to Africa seriously studied the tradition. Until recently, that you have people like Robert Rattray and then later on K. Buzia and others who study the culture. And recently, Professor Kwame Diako and S.C. Dixons and Bishop Kwesi Sapon and the others who are pointing the strength, the intellectual strength in our culture to us, that we should not be ashamed of ourselves. We must be proud of ourselves as a people. And at the moment, there's a paradigm shift when you talk about gospel culture interface. But we will admit that colonization, the legacy, we are still struggling with it.
George, you take the castles where you had dungeons underneath and churches above it. Clearly, these are people who were reading "Love Thy Neighbor as Thyself," and then directly underneath. We don't seem to have grown far from it.
Yeah. And that's the genesis of religious manipulation. We may have had our own forms of using religion to manipulate people, even before, prior to the advent of the, if you like, the colonial and this. People were using, by virtue of their access to the supernatural power, they were still doing certain things, except that in this particular case, we don't have it well documented. Now we have, or we failed to contextualize religion. There is no civilized society that doesn't borrow from outside. So you cannot say that you not borrow. But the question is, how have we done it? How did we do it? So if at the time that these merchants who were wearing the faces or the mask of Christianity were doing this thing, we cannot flog ourselves here, because at that time we didn't have that intellectual power, to meet them, if you like, the way that they ought to have been met. But what have we done since then? Today, people are discouraging naming even the local names. People are saying that it has so many meanings. I don't know whether it affected the bravery of our forefathers, but people are saying that you should not. So you hear now, Inshra, whatever. And I wonder whether that Inshra has actually translated into Inshra. We need to find out. We have you know, we have a population that is disoriented. We have a population that is disoriented. So, for example, if you want to talk about religious manipulation, the failure of the state to provide for citizens created a vacuum that, you know, made citizens feel like thirsty for something. And people are very smart. They are spiritual entrepreneurs who can take advantage of this situation. So if we had addressed the poverty of the mind to come to the poverty of the market, when you have addressed the poverty of the mind, you expect that the poverty of the market will be, or the pocket will be addressed. So then when somebody is telling me that I have to do X, Y, Z, I have the mental capacity to analyze and question that person by why. But as it is now, we have entrenched poverty of the mind so much that it has provided a fertile ground for people who are entrepreneurial. Because I mean, I must say that there are good people who are helping the situation, who are helping people acquire skills through religion and so on and so forth. So we should not probably miss the two. We should make that distinction and tackle where the issue is. But the bottom line is that majority of our people are suffering from poverty of the mind. If you are suffering from poverty of the mind, it predisposes you to any form of poverty, and anybody from anywhere can take advantage of that.
There's a loophole in the market, and you know, obviously a few bad guys are taking advantage of it, Reverend.
You know, religion is very good as far as human history is concerned, all over the world, not only in this country. But religion is one social institution that you can use, misuse, and abuse. You know. Religion has a lot to do with hope and trust. And when people are in need, whoever will come in as a deliverer, as a savior, whoever comes in with hope, you know, you are the best person around. But religion is such that when people buy into it, you know, people may not die for their political parties easily, you know, but there are people who want to die for their faith, for their religion easily. Now, just imagine, and not only in this country, in the US, in East Africa, recently in South Africa, that a pastor or a religious person will gather people, just say the world is coming to an end, and they will count the days, and the world is not coming to an end. And this person said that, oh, okay, this is poison, and people knew they were going to drink poison. Take a cup, and unwillingly they accepted poison in the name of religion, and ended their lives. Elsewhere again, somebody said the world is coming to a close. They waited, whoever was supposed to come, Jesus did not come. They set themselves ablaze. Recently in South Africa, that a pastor had the audacity to say, members go and eat glass, and they jump into that. I must say, even in our own country, there are still manipulations, but they work well when you're able to touch these sensitive areas, like issue about trust and hope. No, these are the pillars of any religion, you see. But that is where somebody can manipulate the issue about trust, issue about hope, and misuse and abuse, especially. I must say that sometimes you think my brother was talking about poverty of the mind and all that. Sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not true. Because you can have instances that where enlightened people, university graduate, you know, university professors, can also be manipulated. In fact, recently we learned from the news that we have a religious body hiding somewhere in this country that will not allow people, that they are expecting Jesus is coming, so they will not work. They are hiding themselves in a bush somewhere. My understanding, some of them are university graduates. So somebody may have intellectual abilities and all that, but religion is so powerful. If it's not handled well, anybody can fall into religious traps. It's possible.
Yes, I mean, the point I made about poverty of the mind, You see, I linked you to the failure of the state. You see, what do people want? All these people, they are either looking for a job, some market, customers, social, support systems, social systems to work. I mean, somebody is even looking for marriage. If we had systems in place, that is providing jobs for people, somebody will not waste the time to go and pray for, so that that person is, prone to being manipulated. If we had systems in place to address social relations, I can go and seek professional advice, even if I want to marry, where there can be that linkage. I mean, whether if we want to move away from our traditional system. Our traditional system, where my mother can, for example, look for a beautiful, courteous, well-cultured, well brought up woman in my village for me. We have moved from some of these systems, so the alternative is what has created this. And so, if for example, the state has succeeded in creating jobs for people, that's the first problem is job. The first problem is job.
Yeah,
money in the pocket. Even when your business is not thriving, it is the macroeconomic conditions in the in society or in the country that makes it work or not. It is your ability to use technology. It's your ability to build a network. If we have systems that are addressing some of these things, certainly people will be exposed enough, and we may not have total reduction or total eradication, but it will come down reasonably. But look, these university guys are desperate. They have come out of the system. Some witch in the country, in their family, is preventing their employment opportunities. So somehow, if he or she is told this story, and it is true, because I mean, in the mind of that person, because he has written thousands of application letters, he's not getting anything. And so somebody sitting somewhere is sitting. So if I told that person that this is the reason why you are not getting job, you need to do X, Y, Z, that person is likely to suppress his thinking ability and first pay attention to what I'm saying. So I'm saying that, for me, the fundamentals are that the state has failed. People are stepping in to provide alternatives. Those people could be, those approaches could be positive. Unfortunately, majority of them are negative, are suppressing the people the more. And I think that we can approach it from, if you like, a developmentalist point of view.
Nana, I agree with him, but please, for the purpose of this discussion, don't let us create impression that religious manipulation can be possible only with people where the state has failed, where people are unemployed, people who you are talking about countries like US, where social welfare system, everything. And I can tell you, I talk about a pastor who gave poison, and it happened in the US. Not in Africa.
The U.S. social system has broken down.
No. It did not happen just last year. What I just mentioned. Please, religious manipulation happens anywhere, everywhere. And even people who are strong, rich, healthy, can fall into that. So I would want us to do the discussion in a more open, that anybody, rich, highly educated, employed, can fall into it, so that we continue from there.
I agree with both of you, but what I wanted to add was that if you look at the number of churches and churchgoers, and especially the number of women, and they all have, I want my business to thrive, I want to marry, I want a child, I want this, and you can't go to NHIS and say, give me fertility treatment. So you have to choose your faith, because you can't afford the amount, so rely on faith. What George is saying, that if the state was able to look after citizens, there are certain people who wouldn't go there, because he already has a job. So he won't go and pray on Wednesday for a job.
I think the broader sense that Reverend is talking about is a global.
I agree.
For us, we are interested in getting solutions to the Ghanaian problem. The global problem, those people, they may have their social system, not working, but that is context specific. In the case of Ghana, how do we make the problem context specific? And I think that if we take a global view, which I agree with Reverend, is good, but if we take also a specific, country specific, if like context view, it will allow us to prescribe the appropriate remedy. Because the global view will lead us into generalization. And when you generalize, you are likely not to find the specific solution, antidote to the problem. That's the danger in that kind of approach. But I agree that we can look at it broadly. And that is why I say that reduce it, because I do not believe that we can eradicate it. No. Even when we succeed in reducing it from this side, different forms will come, because it serves the business interests of those who are manipulating.
I want to take a break, and then when I come back, the other thing we're going to look at before we go to justice and human rights is the lifestyle of some of the church members. Now, it's become one of those things that, oh wow, if he was a CEO of a bank, wouldn't you have given him that money? But again, you ask, well, if he was the CEO of the bank, has he sworn to all these, modesty and everything? But I don't know what the answer is, but I'm sure these guys will help us. Stay tuned. Church and the state. I keep telling you that the conversation behind the scenes sometimes very interesting. But before we go, let's make clear that there are people who are very eloquent, very wealthy, but still get manipulated by these people. So it's not necessarily that only those who are economically challenged that hold victims. We are all vulnerable if we don't take care. But before the break, we're looking at the lifestyles of some of these pastors or preachers, very, very affluent, and flaunt their wealth to the detriment of a poor congregation. And we're asking, is it right? Should it be reduced? I mean, have they worked for their money and therefore they have to flaunt the money? And then I want to link it to how do we register and regulate? Because at the moment I can just get up and say Ansakwa Divine Healing Church, get a tent, get 2 chairs, if I'm lucky to get a drum, well, hey, I've started my church. No regulation whatsoever. How do we go forward like this, Reverend?
Yes, that some pastors have their money, they live well, they drive nice cars. To me, in itself, it's not bad. Especially if they have earned their worth. And I must say, there are people who we see as pastors who belong to other professions as well. There are pastors who are lawyers, there are pastors who are university lecturers, there are pastors who are in military service, other, and all that. And they are paid like any other person. So sometimes we must have that understanding also. But I think the question you are asking is, what do we call ministerial success? At what point will you say a pastor is successful? How do we determine ministerial success? Should it be done by the vehicle somebody drives? So that if I don't drive that car, I'm not successful. Should it be done by what I wear? To me, ministerial success has more to do with our preparedness to be faithful to the gospel rather than possession. To me, the passion of God is, and the purpose of my calling as a pastor is more than my personal comfort. So that if my personal comfort takes the center stage of my ministry, no matter what, I cannot be right. And ministry has a lot to do with being there for others. I am here for you, so that I may have it. But when does somebody, come in? How does an ordinary person, needy person, have some kind of joy, hope in tomorrow because of me? Can somebody trust the church for breakfast, lunch, supper tomorrow? So if we can have a situation where, yes, if you have earned your worth, nothing wrong, but can we also be there for others? How can I go to church and people are in the church, they can access education, they can afford education, they can afford breakfast, lunch, supper, and the church doesn't have answers to that question. And I'm happy as a pastor, I drive the best car in town, I have all that you want to talk about. And I know there are people in my church who cannot pick their medical bills. You see, so yes, I have it, but where do others also come into my success story, my work? And that is why some of the churches, not that they don't have the money, but they will push their money into education. They put their money into health. That because of the wealth of the church, somebody in the rural community, somebody who can't afford education will have some support. Yes, government will have to do it, but the church's wealth can also be directed to situations where some needy person can count on the worth of the church, including that of the pastors, for survival, for hope. And I pray we do more of that rather than just proving to the world that we can compete with everybody.
Before I bring George in, I want to touch on, regularizing or registering, every church unit so that, everybody can have some sort of regulation. Because at the moment, it's free for all. One Bible verse and everybody's got their own interpretation for it, and it's not proving to be a good success.
Now, this is an issue that the Christian Council of Ghana at our AGM seriously we are considering. And we are not attacking anybody. We are not playing holier than thou game here. Only us, church people, may know that you are Pentecostal, this is charismatic, this is whatever. There are people, church is church. You are all the same. Pastors are the same. It's the same with Christians. When you go into Islam, there are lines. Tijaniya, Ahmadiyya, and others. But for some Christians, Muslims are the same. They don't know the differences. And so, what happens as far as Christianity is concerned affects all of us. And you can't say, oh, he's so Pentecostal. All of us, we are in together. That is our testimony. You see, elsewhere, let's go just Ivory Coast. In Ivory Coast, you just can't wake up in the morning and set up a church. You must belong to one of the ecumenical bodies. Ecumenical bodies, we may not believe in the same thing, but we can still come together and have a common platform. And that is what we call ecumenical councils. And in Ivory Coast, before you set up a church, you must belong to one of them, like Christian Council of Ghana, Ghana Pentecostal Council, charismatic, independent churches, that kind of. And that is what they use to monitor, to regulate their own activity, their own performance. So that before even government will come in, the churches themselves will just make some correction and put things in order. There is something in our country. It's very good. It has facilitated church growth. But it seems to me at the same time it's working against us. The laws in this country at the moment allow anybody to bring people together, and you can bring people together under a tree, in a classroom, cinema hall, and like you mentioned, the church that you admire so much, that starts with your name, and call it, you see, and you have a church. Now, I said in one breath that has facilitated church growth because it reduces the restrictions. So if you want to plant a church in anywhere, urban, rural, the next morning if you have some drums, some of the items you mentioned, a church has been born. But at the same time, it's making monitoring and control, regulating Christian activity in this country very difficult. When it happens, the headline, Pastor so what kind of pastor, training, background, code of ethics, you don't know, but pastor, and therefore all pastors are the same. So we think at the moment where we have reached, we shouldn't again wait for government also to set it. When government sets in, then they call it persecution, that you are persecuting us. So we will wish that voluntarily the churches will, you are free to identify with any. The charismatics are there, the Pentecostals are there, the independents, they have their own association, the Catholic, the Christian Council. So by all means, one of these must get closer to your taste, so you identify. But the situation where we've left people just to do what they want to do, if we don't take care, we get to a point that the government and security agencies may be forced You see, because at the moment, you have churches in this country that will not allow pregnant women to go to hospital in the name of church. That will not allow children to go to school in the name of church. All kinds of things are happening, you know, and these security agencies, social welfare people must come in. But the suggestion we are making, Christian Council of Ghana, is that before security agencies come in, before social welfare and other state institutions, at least the churches should be able to regulate some of their own activity. And we plead by this. We are not saying we are perfect, people don't have weaknesses, but it makes easier when you want to monitor and regulate, because you know where that person is hiding and you know how to look for him or her. But the situation where you don't know the person you are looking for, but in the name of church, in the name of God, that person is doing something that is difficult to control. It's not helping the church in this country.
Quickly, and I bring George Jones very quickly. Imagine I have a church and I don't believe pregnant women should go to hospital. But then I want to come and register with the Christian Council because I feel that, you know, I'm an Orthodox believer because I've read it in the Bible somewhere. You then are going to say, no, I'm not going to accept your membership because you have to allow pregnant women to go to hospital. But then again, it's my faith, and I don't think that. So how then do they register?
That is where we talk among ourselves. You see, for instance, if you bring the policeman in, the policeman is not a theologian, but if it's Christian Council, now you have theologians, you read the Bible, other people also read the Bible, and the Bible says iron sharpen iron. So let's talk at that leadership level. You have set up your church, other pastors are also there. Now convince us, let's read Bible. Just on what basis will you say that according to the Bible, if you are using the Bible and you are not using any other faith material, then how do you convince me that according to the Bible, when people are sick, they shouldn't go to hospital, pregnant women shouldn't go to hospital, and that when a pregnant woman attends a hospital, he must be whipped in church? So that we struggle with ourselves, and you must convince all of us. If that is the best way, then all of us tomorrow morning will follow your example. But situations where you don't facilitate dialogue, maybe you know something I must learn, teach me. So that level of leadership, you challenge yourself, and you help other people to maybe also unlearn some of the things they have learned over the years.
George, that's a big one, isn't it? We start from ostentatious life to regulation.
Okay. So let me start from the bottom. But basically, Reverend is encouraging, or the Christian Council is encouraging voluntary registration. The question is that, for how long have we been making this advocacy? I think that for those whose interest itself to stay away from, regulated bodies, they will not listen to the Christian Council. So the question is that, what meaning do we give to our constitutional provision that says that people are guaranteed freedom, association right? Yeah. And what interest does it serve the country if we allow them to continue to do this, where people are chained in prayer camp, where people's dignity, human dignity, is just trampled upon? So I think somehow in supporting what the Christian Council is saying, I think that the state will still have to step in to say that, look, we will guarantee your freedom of worship. However, you need to belong to a regulated body. And that makes it very simple and easy for the state to deal with some of these people who will do things, who will take the Bible as their own memoirs and interpret it the way that they want. And I think that probably can support the call that the council is making, because they have making this calls time and time and again. Many of those guys are not listening because it doesn't serve their import. They are so arrogant. They don't know even the essence of belonging.
They are not arrogant. Maybe they haven't seen the need. So let's
well, that's fine. That's fine.
And again, I mean, if I have a church, I haven't registered with any communicable body, and you talk like this, I call my lawyers, and my lawyer tells me, "Oh, you haven't. The laws allow you can go ahead." And seriously,
Reverend, that is right. That's why I'm saying that
the person is not arrogant. The laws in this country allow me.
That's why I'm saying that. What meaning do we give to that provision? Do we just say that everybody must go to school? How? Everybody must. You can have whichever religious decision you have. How do you do that? So for me, somehow we haven't tested the law. That's where I'm coming from. It doesn't say that because you can just belong to any association, Don't people have the right to demonstrate? But don't you have to go through the what you call Public Order Act, comply with it before you can be allowed to, demonstrate? So there ought to be some regulatory mechanism, and that is the point I am making. That whether people like it or not, we need to be serious as a country to say that at this point in our, our life as a country, we need to put our feet on the ground. Why is it that the models of democracy, even in the UK, there are charity, there are institutions that regulate charity institutions, organizations. So we can't just borrow anything like that. And when we try to impose on ourselves, it creates problem for us. Let us begin to think about how we can regulate it in a way that doesn't, affect people's right to worship.
Is it not challenging because it's a matter of faith? Because
what is challenging if you have said that, Nana, before you work at multimedia, belong to the Association of Journalism or whatever. What is challenging about that?
See, that's not got to do with faith, is it? That's just A or B. But with faith,
I do not think that the doctrine or the dogma of reverence organization or the members is the same. Some of them sit down, some of them clap, some of them do that, some of them the fundamental thing which binds all Christians together is believing Jesus Christ and so on and so forth. So those ones, nobody can change it. This is about regulating, making it, bringing in sanity, so that we, for example, if I told somebody that you cannot have this kiosk at my backyard to disturb everybody, that person should be under, that sensitization should come from the apex body to say that, look, members, if you want to set up or build, you don't go and put it in a residential area where you disturb the peace of people. Some of them do not even have that understanding. So when you are raising some of this issue, we are born some. That's how you are seen.
I see you like that. You see, we need to educate our people. To me, the real issue is the law, the legal framework. Now, if you have a legal framework that allows certain things to be done, that is where you start from. Either we now enact new laws to regulate, or then you intensify public education for people to accept and voluntarily commit themselves to some of these things.
Yeah, so Reverend,
you can't force them.
Yeah, no, we can't force. But what you are saying is the latter. What you are doing, and I'm saying that is good, but it seems that we are not getting the results. By appealing to people.
We haven't done enough.
Well, probably we haven't done enough. So, but I'm saying at some point we will need to. The state will have to step in. But let me come to the issue of lifestyle. Lifestyle, because I think that you box all of them all of them together. I think that we can link it to also the regulation. If you have a church that has this, I don't know, committees or executive board that takes decision, the pastor doesn't call, in the first place, the pastor in charge doesn't say, my church. As soon as you begin to hear, my church, I set up this, my church, you cannot work with me, you have to go and set up your own church. Then there's a red flag that is being hosted. So, people, in churches where you have all these committees, the pastor cannot get up to say that because God has said prosperity is mine, and so I'm going to buy the latest car in town. Because that money doesn't belong to you. But in this unregulated, and I'll call it unregulated because they don't belong to anybody, any apex body that regulates the activities, or that they can seek advice or learn practice, good practice and best practice, as we say, from. One day they just get up and say, oh, today we are buying that. Today we are buying this. And as a pastor, God has blessed me and that. Forgetting about the fundamental, teachings of Jesus Christ. Why do you build your this in here? So it comes to the manipulation and the unregulated manner that many of them are operating. My solution, if you like, is that people need to be aware.
So what then is modesty? If a pastor bought a house for $1.2 million, are you saying he's paid too much, or should a pastor only buy a house $60,000? How then do we?
If you wrote your book and you got that money, you paid your tax, and you still had that money to buy, I don't have any problem with you. You are using your intellect to do something. If you had some business before even you had a call and you are making that money and you are making money and you are using that business to buy. But I have a problem where I
from the
do not
offering.
see that you are a lawyer, you are anything, you are a doctor, you are practicing something, and even if you are a doctor, we know how much doctors are paid. And so it will be very, interesting to see a doctor buying a house at somewhere Tasako, because we know how much they are paid. Whether
So
that
coming
doctor is
from
doing,
the offering alone, you don't think is right?
and I think that is a big injustice to the congregation, because there are so many coming from the offering. And if that decision is made by the congregation, I mean, in a fair, transparent manner, I mean, I don't have any problem. But what we know, the evidence is anecdotal, is that some of these people take the decision and by they control the purse. So they buy it and everybody say, oh, God is blessing faster. But God is not blessing us.
Nana, you are not being fair at all.
I'm going to take a break and I'll let you comment on it. I'll take a break and I'll let you comment on it. I'll take a break and I'll let you comment on it. Stay tuned. Well, we're talking about ostentatious lifestyles. Where do you draw the line? What is modesty? What is above and what is below? And I'll get Reverend to make a comment on that before we move on.
Modesty is difficult to define for somebody, but if you are a Christian, you must allow God's word, the Spirit of God, your own conscience, the environment within which you function. Assuming I go to church, a church that some of my members cannot even pay their fees, and I stand in front of the church and tell them how much my dog eats, amount of money I spend on my dog, and I call that modesty, I will say you are insulting the people. You understand? Even though for that person that is modest, because somebody spent more than that on his or her dog, but I must allow God's word, the Holy Spirit who is at work in me, my conscience and the environment to help me define modesty. So you can't have one definition of modesty that must apply to all people and all situations.
Let me quickly move on to taxation. Can the church lead for the other citizens to follow, or is the church always going to be exempt from taxation? Because some churches own schools and other businesses. And should we tax them, or should we say because it's NGO, leave the church?
Yes, let's be very careful here when we talk about this particular subject. When we give impression that the churches are not paying taxes, we are not being fair. But I must also be very careful. I speak here for the Christian Council of Ghana. I must be very careful the extent I go with the issue I've just touched on. I know for a fact that all the Christian Council of Ghana churches, your pastors, you pay their income tax at the end of the month, your property tax and all those things. You pay them. And you must pay. You see, I want to believe others are also doing that. If you have business component, you must register that separately and pay tax. For instance, if you run a transport business, if you run a guest house, if you run a restaurant, you know, if a church runs a business, now that is not charity. So you must register it. And if you need to pay VAT, I mean issue VAT receipt and all that, do so. Pay the tax as those who are in that profit-making entity must pay. You see. Now when I hear people saying that the churches must pay tax, either they are saying that the churches don't pay tax. He said, then you don't know what you are talking about. They do. But if you are talking about something else,
maybe they're trying to tax the offering.
Now, if you do that also, then you are calling for a new legal framework. You see, for instance, if you say that, oh, these days the churches are getting money, they are doing this, so let's tax them, then I would say any institution that survives on charity must also be taxed. In that case, then political parties in this country must pay that kind of tax. At the moment, we don't have that. And so, it's the same way that all those who survive on charity, Old Boys and Girls Association and all those, on charity. So if you talk about, but the churches are getting a lot of days and all that, then you don't also single the churches out and say because of your building, because of your offering, pay tax, because your pastors are dressing well, pay tax. What kind of tax is that? Then it's the politicians who are dressing and who are driving better cars, then pay them and tax them. Then it's the political parties that are raising. In fact, as for the political parties, even the laws demand that at the end of every election, they must declare. So then that is where you must go, not the churches. So if anything at all, then some of this argument by the churches are making money. Then the political parties are also making money. Then bring a legal framework that will bring all of us together. But don't single out that church people who are dressing well, church people who are having offering and all that should pay tax. That one is not fair. But churches that are running businesses must accept to register the business component of the churches and pay tax. That one, yes.
George, what should you do? Say that if your charity earns more than 1,000 cedis a week, then you pass the threshold, pay tax. Should we say
there is a danger in that argument. People make that argument out of frustration, frustration with the system. People who are milking others, but you don't put, you don't visit the sins of others on everybody. We need, and I think the Reverend has done justice to the topic by saying that we need to make a distinction between business entities that are owned by the church and issues like offering and so on and so forth. I think that when it comes to, for example, schools, hospitals, churches are the ones that are citing their facilities in the hard-to-reach areas. And often they don't operate some of these facilities, or I think that's the gender, they don't operate it on the basis of profit making. And so for me, we should not even go to that area. What we need to address is that how are those who are earning income out of the offering, how are they paying, whether they are paying their taxes or not? The church administrative staff, the pastor or whoever, even if you give a gift. You see, there's also one thing that people also have to be very fair to themselves. That if you take a gift as any person, as any member of society, the law enjoins you to pay tax. So we should not say that pastors, because pastors alone should do that. Everybody in this country is required to do that. So that's one area that the GRA can look at and rake in revenue. So let's make that distinction and say that the church is doing wonderful when it comes to provision of services in the areas of education and health. When they take this money, majority of them, I must say that some, it ends up in shares and buying but majority of them are spending these monies in providing services to the poor.
I give the last word.
We should look at those who are not doing this and target them. But I don't know, it is going to be very difficult.
I give the last word to Reverend. And Reverend, before you finish, I want to congratulate you. And I hope that this is not going to be the end, because I think, personally, it's long overdue that the church as a body, took up that moral responsibility to say, listen, because you are sort of a moral policeman, so, and the state owes obligation to citizens to be moral. So who else to police it other than the church body? So, more grace to your elbows, and I give you the last word.
Yeah, we thank God. Ghana as a country at the moment, we are very religious. I mean, if you bring other religions, Muslims, traditional worshippers, we can conclude that we are 100% religious. Yeah. The challenge for us is, how do we allow religion to facilitate growth and development? So that we are not just, because if you are building a society, if you are building a nation, you look for some of your strength and ask yourself, how can this particular strength also make a significant contribution? We are very religious, and we've reached a point where religion must be significant in our national growth. And I pray and hope that whether we are into issue of human rights, whether we are into education, whether we are into economics, whether we are into security, religion in this country must be considered. It must not be manipulated. Our politicians must help us, and religious people must also see this, that we must find a way that religion will make significant contribution towards national growth, and nobody should seek opportunity rather to manipulate religion in this country for his or her own advantage. May God use our religion at this moment to show us the way ahead of us for today and the days to come.
Gentlemen, thank you very, very much. Just talking to Osei-Bimpeh, Country Director, Send Ghana, and Reverend Dr. Kwabena Upuni Frimpong, who is the General Secretary of the Christian Council. My name is Nanan Sakwao, and as I say, tomorrow we'll be back to do it all over again. Thanks for watching.